Good morning.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. For the record, we're here talking about Carpenter plus DRA. We're part of the CNCF. Thanks everybody for being respectful and kind and inclusive. Um, cool. Jason, you sort of mentioned status quo, no huge updates.
Yeah, so I guess the updates I do have to give. Alima, your PR looks good. It looks like it just needs a rebase, but that should be good to merge and we can get that into the next release. So I just gave the approval this morning, but it needs a rebase to merge.
Okay, I'll do that after this meeting. Thanks.
Um, yeah, the other thing is right now, the main thing I'm working on is trying to work out what the allocation algorithm looks like for Carpenter. Um, it We're not going to be able to reuse the upstream allocator directly. It just doesn't match with Carpenter's model of taking node claims with a full set of um, like we could be in any zone, like have any set of labels, and we're restricting them down as we schedule pods to it. I tried for a while to figure out a way to just integrate the upstream allocator with that, see if there was some way we could basically mock out nodes from our node claims and do that in an efficient manner, but doesn't
So when
really
you say
seem.
upstream allocator, you mean in the cube scheduler code?
Yeah, I mean the
Yeah.
actual like allocator interface. We should still be able to reuse a lot of the code from the allocator, like a lot of the util functions, etc. I was really hoping we could just reuse the upstream allocator entirely, because that is where most of the complexity is. But uh, I think it's probably a bit of a futile effort. So yeah, basically right now just trying to work out what that allocation algorithm needs to look like for Carpenter. Um, and then the only other thing I've been thinking about is what we want to do for like feature gates. So like right now I think DRA has 7 or 8 feature gates in upstream. So right now
Yes.
we're only planning on having one feature gate for Carpenter. I do think it warrants discussion if we want to basically now enabling and disabling each of those upstream feature gates for Carpenter as well. And in particular with the alpha features, what that does to our like version compatibility matrix. Because one of the challenging things with Carpenter is we try and build it to be as compatible with as many Kubernetes versions as possible. Um, so now you kind of end up skewing your compatibility matrix from Carpenter to Kubernetes versions based on which feature gates you are enabling.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a reasonable position, at least to launch the MVP, would be that Carpenter DRA support will be for GA DRA APIs and features. So we're now at now's a sort of convenient time to have that posture because the sort of foundational resource claim, resource slice, device class, those APIs are now GA in 134. So if we scope the Carpenter DRA work to the GA DRA stuff in 134, we're in a pretty good position to not have to worry about that.
Yeah,
And
I,
and
I
and I
think
think we should reevaluate that as it goes forward. If there's customer demand for, we could list off a million prioritized alternatives, DRA admin acts. If there's like customer demand for that to be for Carpenter to be aware of those particular things, we can maybe take those other companies. Anyway, that's a thought. I'm not sure what other folks think.
yeah, the main reason I like to consider like support for non-GA features is some of at least the value add that I've been able to communicate that DRA has for our customers specifically is like partitionable devices. That
Yeah.
is kind of the big selling point in terms of this gives you a capability that you didn't have before with Carpenter. I mean, don't get me
No,
wrong,
that's fair.
DRA.
Most of that stuff is not GA'd yet. Most of the GA'd stuff is, and this makes sense. It's the standard API that enables all this innovation to happen. But you can get into conversations with folks when you present that foundational part of DRA, they could be like, I can do this with node labels, and so the roadmap is a little bit longer
Yep.
in terms of being able to describe DRA in a truly differentiating way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I mean, minimally, as long as we're supporting the V1 API, like supporting the V1 APIs is what we're planning on doing. Minimally, of course. So I think from a like UX CX perspective, it doesn't make too big of a difference because any of the changes on top of the V1 APIs are going to be non-breaking. But the only thing I want to make sure of is we're not like architecting ourselves into a corner by not anticipating some of these features that are coming up, like partitionable devices, device taints, priority lists, etc. I don't I don't think we are. I don't think any of them add significant enough complexity or like completely change the way that we would go about doing an implementation.
Yeah,
Uh,
another easy way to do it would just be to inherit the feature flags from Kubernetes core and expose them as Carpenter feature flag. Like that would be it adds more UX burden. It's less ergonomic from a user perspective, but from a maintenance perspective of the Carpenter project, it's kind of, I don't know, the minimum amount of effort you'd have to do to get the equivalent granularity that's
yeah. Well, and
and it's
that's
durable. Like we could do that for the next, let's say there's 8 more releases where DRA stuff starts to new features are going to trickle in as new feature flags. So that kind of approach would be durable over that 2 or 3 year period.
yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking. My only big concern about that is the issue of we're going to basically support, like, let's say for an alpha feature, we are going to be supporting the version of an alpha feature that was implemented at the time Carpenter shipped. Um, so that kind of does weird things to our version skew policy, or not version skew policy, but like version compatibility matrix. I'm thinking it mostly just comes down to being a configuration burden.
Yeah. So are you
This
thinking in
table.
terms of like enabling a feature flag on a version of Kubernetes for which that is no longer appropriate? And now so Carpenter has to essentially throw a short circuit error
Pretty
during
much.
instantiation. Like, yeah, you can't use DRA feature XYZ with Kubernetes 133. Like you need
Yeah.
134 or greater.
Yeah, like let's consider like if there's a V1 Alpha 1 version of the CRD and we no longer support it, or not the CRD, like actual upstream resource, but that version is no longer supported on Kubernetes, or a field on the V1 one that was for an alpha feature is no longer served. Um, Now that kind of skews our compatibility matrix. I think the way you get around that is just computing or just communicating that our compatibility matrix doesn't include like some of these alpha features, and then maybe having a sub compatibility matrix for like if you're using this alpha DRA feature, this is supported on these Kubernetes versions. It maybe adds a little bit more complexity for people to reason about, but I think if you're already going into the land of enabling alpha features, you've kind of
Yeah.
signed up for it.
Yeah, I think the easiest guidance for customer guidance would be if you're going to be using DRA features, latest Carpenter, latest Kubernetes for best results. Like
Yeah.
otherwise,
Which,
otherwise, thinking about how that's going to work in your environment, it's going to be super challenging. And I think that it's the burden is on projects like Carpenter to not put, let's say, customers in a situation where the Carpenter runtime is trying to construct a API that doesn't exist. And so then you have like these runtime edge cases that are super gnarly. Like you want to somehow gate those during container
yeah,
instantiation if you can. So
in our case, fortunately, at least, we're not like actually doing the allocations or creating resource slices, resource claims, etc.
yeah.
So at the very least, we shouldn't ever be in a situation where we try and do like an update or a patch or a create, and that fails because the resource no longer exists. I think the main thing is going to be if basically if there were fields that we were relying on to support a particular set of features, and those are no longer served by the API server.
Yeah, I mean, that shouldn't happen. Most of the stuff should be taken care of by the group version kind logic in the. Go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong though, with deprecations in Kubernetes, eventually the fields just stop getting, or like an old version of an API or specific fields do just stop getting served.
For sure. I don't anticipate that's a low probability outcome for these DRE features, but it's certainly possible that we would enable a DRE feature that doesn't actually graduate.
Yeah, I think in our case, since we have the V1 out APIs now, we're going to build everything on the V1 APIs. So it would only really matter for features that don't end up graduating.
Yeah, I think so.
So, and as far as I could tell, all the features I have looked into seem to have a relatively clear path to graduation.
I think that's right. Yeah.
So I don't know how much of a concern it actually is in practice.
No, it's just that, the burden's on us to know actually understand how all this stuff works. So
Yeah. I
we
think the
can
main
protect
thing
the
would be if
users.
there's any behavior differences that are introduced between Kubernetes versions. That would be the main sharp edge that people need to be informed about. And that we need to keep up to date on and make sure that we communicate in our docs. Like if let's say Carpenter 1.8 has support for DRA with support for device taints, and the way device taints just works between versions or changes between versions, we would have to communicate on 1.9 or on 1.8. This only works on these Kubernetes versions. You'll get weird behavior on others.
Wait, so why can't we just say, like, I feel like most of the issues are coming from the APIs, right? Like, we only want to use V1 APIs.
Well, it's more so like there can be a field added to a V1 API that field is alpha, and then on a later Kubernetes version, that field is removed, or the semantics of that field can change. I don't know how often the latter happens. I've not really been around when
Unfortunately, more
API
than
updates.
never, which is when
Yeah.
that would be the correct answer. But yeah, we've been involved in especially what the most common pattern is, releasing a bug as a feature and then later on trying to change the bug. Like, oh, let's actually do what we were supposed to do for the first time. So sometimes that happens super quickly, which can produce undesirable changes because for, you know, folks were running clusters and they were learning how to deal with the behaviors that they were seeing and not understanding that there were bugs. And so the behavior changes because the maintainers thought they were fixing a bug, but it ends up being a gnarly outcome change that customers are unexpected or not expecting.
Well, it's Hiram's law, right? Every bug becomes a feature.
Yeah, 100%.
So
Wait,
yeah.
with that being said, like, what do we think the timeline is in terms of like, because I don't have a very good idea of how long this will all take. Like, are we thinking like a year?
What do you mean by all? What's like the exit criteria here?
I guess, okay, well, let's start with just the MVP.
I would like to have I would like to have something working by November at the latest.
Yeah, I mean, that's aggressive, but that's realistic.
Okay.
If Jason, Jason's a maintainer, so if you don't get distracted,
Yeah, that's
that's
the trick.
that's
But
that's a reasonable aggressive expectation to shoot for. So
yeah.
yeah, but I agree with Jason. The all thing is DRA is part of the Kubernetes API. So supporting DRA is going to be infinite. Like we will always be doing that in any project that integrates with Kubernetes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I mean I would expect the main evolution of the feature to slow down over the next year or two. Like right now I know there's like 7 or 8 KEPs which have been approved and there's some implementation in progress for. I know there's quite a few more open ones.
There's gonna be more. Yeah.
I so I know I imagine that will slow down, but I think we're going to be playing catch up with supporting these features for the foreseeable future.
And I think at least between the three, I haven't heard from you, Cyprian, so I don't mean to exclude you. But I think between the three of us, after this original MVP, getting the core set of APIs implemented in Carpenter, we will have a good foundation upon which to start distributing the work that you're describing among the community. I think we'll learn how to scope it. Okay, here's a new DRA feature flag that's scoped to this part of the API. We can guide someone like this is how you'll implement this in Karpenter, and so it's not going to be like, the same person just doing it forever. I feel like it's appropriate at this point. It's foundational enough that someone in Jason's maintainer position on a project like Karpenter would drive that, but I think it's reasonable to expect that we can distribute the work in 2026, 27, 28 kind of thing.
Yeah, the biggest hurdle is going to be getting in support for structured parameters and basically setting up a framework that we can expand on in the future.
So I'm actually going to, full disclosure, in 40 minutes, I'm going to be going to the AI Conformance Weekly, and autoscaling is a topic in that. And so one of the reasons for having some sort of an ETA right now would be to be able to anticipate questions from the conformance community as they start defining autoscaler requirements for platform providers. So, for example, it's fairly consensus-y at this point that should be labeled as, so for a platform provider like EKS or AKS or GKE to be labeled as AI conformant, the group of folks is currently proposing that DRA must be enabled. So build an EKS cluster, and you have the DRA APIs exposed to you. That's, as far as I understand, that's available in 133. So that particular line item is good from an EKS perspective. From an AKS perspective, it's a 134 thing, so it's good from an AKS perspective. GKE, I think 132. So anyway, it's a significant thing, but the major cloud providers are already kind of on board with that. A more interesting topical conversation is like, what does it mean if I'm EKS and I enable DRA, but I enable Karpenter as an autoscaler and it doesn't support DRA? Does that somehow invalidate my conformance? Because now, so these are active conversations, and given the state of DRA, given the relative new state of DRA's GA and my understanding of the autoscaling landscape, we're trying to narrow down the language so that we don't exclude Karpenter, like we don't put ourselves in a position where we're like penalizing folks for using a project like Karpenter just because it doesn't support DRA. That doesn't make any sense. That's not actually serving users. So, but to the extent that we can get some DRA support in Karpenter as soon as possible, makes all that stuff more practical. Just giving some context to that, to the getting this done sooner rather than later, so that Karpenter doesn't become some outlier. I think ultimately it would be a somewhat academic committee type designation, but we just want to avoid that,
Sure. Yeah, I think as far as timelines go, like I'm tracking, we want to have support for structured parameters minimally by November.
Yeah.
So that is the main thing I'm prioritized to work on. Of course, other stuff comes up. And so this past
Yeah,
month,
and we're invested in it too. So we can, as we get
yeah,
more familiar, we can probably add more muscle to that, and maybe.
yeah, I think it's realistic, especially as we get closer to that kind of soft November deadline. I can start being like, I can't prioritize other things because we need to get this out. So
Yeah.
um yeah, with that, I think that's pretty realistic. As far as other features go, I'm less certain. I would like to also see support for some of the beta um, feature gates in November as well. So, like admin access, for example, should be relatively straightforward to add support for.
Yeah.
Um, I think, uh, is it that and prioritized list? I think those might be the only two that are in beta right now.
Yeah, but I want to say prioritized alternatives is gonna spawn more caps. So there's gonna be a prioritized. I think let me get back to you on that. So
Yeah, I
I
imagine
know
it'll
I know I'm
be.
being recorded. So if anybody's watching this and I'm full of hot air, apologies in advance.
I imagine minimally there will be something for scoring. I've seen that's been a pretty active
Oh, yeah, for
discussion.
sure. Yeah.
So yeah. So minimally I'd like to see the beta. Probably for my own internal prioritization purposes, I'm going to try and get partitionable devices in there as well. But that is something that could slip if needed.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah,
Okay,
minimum,
cool.
yeah,
Oh, sorry.
minimum structured parameters.
So I'll be at the 3 p.m. Pacific Carpenter gathering today, and I'll share any outcomes from the conformance as it relates to autoscaling, and then we can just quickly summarize this conversation. It sounds like next steps, Lima rebase, first PR will land. That's great. Do you need Jason, as you um, evaluate the allocator logic and cube scheduler and what Carpenter's going to need to like sort of backfill? Is
Mhm.
that going into the RFC doc? Is there
Yeah,
anything we can?
it's going to be in the RFC doc.
Okay,
I'm still working through it right now, but
cool.
uh,
Yeah, we'll be. I'm sure we'll be on it like flies when the language lands and adding comments and that kind of thing. So
yeah, I think as far as the other thing that could maybe be done in parallel is like some of the testing stuff that we had talked about last week. It does seem like just having some out-of-band controller that creates resource slices um, should work for our Quack use case.
yeah,
So
I see. Got it.
I was imagining if we could build out something where it's like you have a config map with a node selector and a resource slice, and it looks for, okay, any nodes which match this node selector, create a resource slice for that node.
Okay, cool. Maybe Alima, we can refer you to Alay's work in the perf test
Mhm.
project where that approach was sort of prototyped. Um,
Yeah, because if
you
we
can
could
get some
build out
background on
into
that.
that, that would definitely help a lot with both implementation and long-term testing.
Cool.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. Welcome, Garvin and Cyprian. Do you have anything that's listening in?
Yeah, sorry, I'm late. I've been trying to join this, but been missing it.
It's all good.
Yeah, and I was hoping to be the other meeting, but was a nice listening part. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jason, for all the updates.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks all for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.